I'd like to see everybody this evening. How's everybody doing? All right. Um, we're blessed tonight to have a very important speaker. And he's somebody who I feel very indebted to in this state. I'm going to start introducing by doing a personal introduction, how I got in touch with him. I think I was in junior high, and I was fortunate enough to have a community library in Compton, California. And I would go to this library, and one time I got this book. It was one of those books they would put in our libraries back in the days of the Cold War. A few of us in here can remember the Cold War. And during that time, they would put some propaganda in the library to try to brainwash us. And I read this book. It had something about a brother by the name of Maxwell Stanford. They had a picture, and they said Derek Hoover said he was the most dangerous man in America. You know, when black people get out like an oppositional consciousness, I said, damn, I need to find this brother. I was about 14 years old, 14, 15, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then, maybe a few years later, my mother got something called Black Scholars, the magazine still comes out today. And she brought it home to me. By this time, I'm about 16, 17. And there was an article in there, I can't remember which article it was, but featured contributor in Black Scholars in that time. And I just read it, and everything in that article resonated with me. You know, and during that time, we talked about last night, and had the film Ghetto Physics here, the importance of vision. Because one of the things we're missing in our communities today, not just in the movement, but in our communities, is during the 60s and 70s, we had vision. You know, we might have been wrong about some stuff. You know, we thought maybe we were going to take power in a few years. I remember arguing with some friends on the corner of Aquila and Compton Boulevard that black people were going to win the revolution in about 5 years. You know, but we were wrong about that. But that thing kind of motivated us, and it kept us moving on some things. You know, kept us made us active because we had hope, because we had a vision. A couple of years later, when I'm 18, and I would get another black scholar, and this brother has an article in it. By that time, his name was Ahmad. And in that article, I think it was called "We Are All Prisoners of War." And he talked about those people who were incarcerated, who've been fighting for our people. And he said all of our people were like a captive African nation. And then it was like a layout of a program. And it said at that time the brother had been captured and he was incarcerated. And I wanted to find out what I could do about it. I think that year I started college, I was a freshman. And then a few days later, I got a call from some people at another campus, and they said they were organizing a defense committee for them. And I got involved actively in the defense committee. And I think that was the first real activism I think I did in my life, working on the defense committee. I met people who are now like lifelong friends, but like Brother Watani who's out in the lobby, Brother Kumwaka, and they were still other friends. So we've never ever lived in the same city, but he's always been like one of my teachers. Like I said, long before I met him, I was able to read his articles. So now let me give you a more formal biography about who Max Stanford is. Unfortunately, we do not have his book here tonight. His book here tonight. He will return the Whirlwind. Some of you might have read it if you were in one of my classes. There'll be another event later on this week, and his book will be here. I'll announce that later on. That book, and if you read that book, and I told him this tonight, he starts with a biography, an autobiography, really, of how he came into consciousness. And he talks about, in his family, there were members of the Nation of Islam. His father was a member of the NAACP, And he said he was influenced by this giant who comes out of our movement by the name of Robert Williams. He talked about, but not only talked about black people needing to defend themselves, but organized black people. He talked about the influence of the Montgomery bus boycott. How his father told him that this was significant because this showed that black people could stick together. And most black folks, we know that we were told you can't get together, right? So that was just a tremendous example to him. And these influences also from the left. As I mentioned in the time of the Cold War. You know, a lot of us don't know about the left or people who talk about that we need a whole new system, a socialist system, or opposed to capitalism. But he was influenced by all of these things in his family and his neighborhood. And so he was a part of the development in the early 60s. They called themselves like the third force. That they identified with the activism of Smith and Ford, the direct action approach. They were influenced by the Nation of Islam and what the Nation of Islam said about self-reliance, being independent, being self-determining. But they combined some of those things to create an element in our movement they related to find the revolutionary master. They were also influenced by the left, saying that we needed a new system. The black people wouldn't be free. They quoted Du Bois by saying the system that enslaved us will not free us. But one of the reasons that he and I talked about this as we were on our way here, one of the things that was different about this organization is they didn't necessarily push themselves out front. They kind of worked through other organizations, influenced other organizations. Sometimes they organized themselves in an underground type way. But they had an impact on a lot of the movements we know today. If you read Manning Marable's book, whether you like it or not, one of Manning's main sources for Malcolm was Brother Muhammad Ahmad. Okay, because he was the person who was close to Malcolm X. He was close to Robert Williams, though you know Robert Williams was. He was very close and astute to Queen Mother Moore, who was a modern day mother of the reparations movement. And it's a blessing that he's here. What I mean by that, it's a blessing because again, this is a man that I read as a kid. The J. Edgar Hoover said was the most dangerous man in America. Y'all feel what I'm saying? This is a man who was a political prisoner. Okay, and survived all that. Survived people trying to kill him. So it's a blessing that he's here tonight. I think he has a lot to say, and I just want us to bring up with a strong hand Brother Muhammad Isaiah, Dr. Muhammad.
Dr. Millie, let's start with the greetings. Assalamu alaikum. And whatever spiritual choice you have, that's greeting too. Only reason I'm here is because of our African ancestors who are still with us in this room. And I really don't know where to start, so I want you to be patient. But I am thankful to Allah to have the parents that I had, the family that I had because they and my environment because they produced it. And at an early age, my father, who was my most instrumental teacher, mentor teacher, um, said someone had to sacrifice um, to help advance us to liberate our people. We were standing on the steps of 356 Market 6th Street, which that is from the house. And he was an exterminator that had the suburban rap. So he could take me as a child with him and to work. And so I got to meet many of the millionaires in Philadelphia. And if I didn't meet them, I was in their houses, taught me how to exterminate. And one evening, we were standing and he said, "You see how they live? You see how we live?" He said, "Someone has to sacrifice it in order to change it." I was 16 years old. And he did. Yeah. But I mean, he had, he didn't realize that he had impact on it. So in the back of my mind was, somehow we can, move forward. And on February 1st, 1960, February 1st should be a holiday. Right. Because 4 brothers in North Carolina A&T sat in a Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. Within 3 months, 50,000 students were demonstrating all throughout the South against Jim Crow segregation in public facilities. And it just spread. Needless to say, I didn't get to school until September, but I, started demonstrating in Philadelphia and in support of it, and would go to churches to listen to it. It impacted those brothers who I can't remember all the names. Students should be heroes because they took what Rosa and Mrs. Parks and Joanne, her name, last name, Robinson, Joanne Robinson, and of the Women's Political Council. It was the Women's Political Council who called for the Montgomery bus boycott. And Mrs. Parks was part of the Women's Political. Mrs. Parks was part of Ella Baker's network in the 1940s. If you read Rosa's autobiography, she said that if she had looked up that day at the bus driver, she wouldn't have got on the bus. Because that same bus driver had put her off the bus for doing the same thing in 1941 when I was born. You hear me? That's how long she had been organized. Yeah. So, movement, Mao Zedong said, try, fail, try, fail, try, fail, try again, and continue winning. So, when we look at the civil rights and Black Power, or Black Revolution as it was called, and even the sort of little outbreaks of Occupy Wall Street, and what else will come, is a continuum. So we need to see that, this continuum. Because when we look at, Robert Williams could have been my uncle, right? So my father was supporting Robert Williams in the United States. So it's generation after generation. So it's important to study our history, to study African American history, to study labor history. They're interrelated. And so when we look at Montgomery, we look at Rosa Parks, but it's the Parks Institute in Detroit that the Parks left. No one talks about Mr. Parks. We heard Mr. Parks recruited Rosa into the university. That was a love story. It took her screaming and dragging it into the movement. And Mrs. Parks talks about how she would have to be in the back room in the early part because the men would be in the front room with the guns, protecting them in case the Klan would come in. House. Stop. And so, and the quiet, best kept secret in the liberation movement has been the consistent leadership of African American men. So it was the women that made, for some reason, made the Montgomery bus boycott successful. And we need to look at networks. No man, no woman is an island. So we don't get to wherever we ever get to on our own. And so, if it wasn't for A. Philip Randolph, it would have been a successful Montgomery bus boycott. Because the key man that made the Montgomery bus boycott go around was E.D. Nixon, who was the treasurer of the Montgomery Improvement Association, who was a Pullman car porter. And so he was also the head of the Montgomery or Alabama NAACP. And Rosa Parks was his son. And also head of the youth church. And so you had these networks. And so it wasn't the first time that people had tried to desegregate the buses. It was your international situation getting better in terms of Africa, Asia, decolonizing from the West in powers. And you had a rank situation when Mrs. Parks, who was that interconnecting link between the people, between the women and the men, you know, everybody was a member of the and so, and the church, right? She was the ideal person to mobilize. That made the government. And that sparked modern civil rights movement. But on February 1st, 1960, and that was your adults. And February 1st, 1960, this is when students just, burst forth. And Elevator, who had worked with Mrs. Parks and the NAACP, as well as Martin, who arose out of the Montgomery boycott. And helped with A. Philip Randolph raise $90,000 to make Montgomery successful, the boycott successful. Impressed the time Martin that he had to expand the movement across the South. And she became the interim secretary or executive secretary of the SCLC. The reason why she was the interim, that means not permanent, temporary, executive secretary, was because one, she was a woman. Two, Ella was not a minister. Yeah. And so she, helped organize this SBS. So when in '60, when we had these sit-ins break out, she impressed upon young people like yourself, you have something here that you have not been corrected. Form something of your own. And she helped form the student nonviolent community. She borrowed $500, something specific. I think it was $500. And we went to an alma mater at Charlotte University. And we convened a conference, I think it was April 14th, 1960, where 200 for all these leaders came together and they formed the student nonviolent community. And for the first year, they chose a temporary first chairman. Does anyone here know who the first chairman of Smith was? He was the next to the last chairman. No. You're getting close to it. No. Marion Barry. Marion Barry. And let me say this, and I'm going to open it up for questions. If it wasn't for Snake, it would not have been around, and it would not have been Black Panther Party. If it wasn't for Ram, it wouldn't have been the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. So Snake, Ram, the Black Panther Party, and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and all the other formations that evolved from those were formed by African American students in the 1960s. Even when we look at Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton, right, who romanticize, brothers who hustle, or what they call the lumber, were part-time students. So, Huey had dropped out of school. They dropped out of school. We dropped, out of school, in some of us in life. And before that, and enslaved. People dropped out of school. Were organized in the South. Albany, Georgia. Organized. Now, your president, who didn't come to the aid of who? A sister. What was her name? Huh? Surratt. Okay. Who she married to? Right? Charles Surratt was the executive, was the field secretary for Smith, who started or was instrumental in starting the Albany movement in 1962, 61, and 62. Her husband. So, you have a continuum. You have a continuum. So she's still doing the work. And so that's important. Now, if it wasn't for Malcolm X, you wouldn't have had a ramp. And Malcolm represented the left wing of the Nation of Islam. We had different sections in the Nation of Islam. And we went to Malcolm. Malcolm, we didn't realize Malcolm was having problems. And he said, work on that. So if he had told me to join the Nation of Islam on Thanksgiving of 1963, I would have never done it. So we did. And that's how Graham formed off campus. Now, Hoover pinned Graham on this. So I happened to be one of the organizers that took Graham off campus. But I did not stop Graham. Graham grew out of a process of organizing or revolutionary organizing on campus. And it was related to the civil rights movement, where we were struggling for student rights and a more democratic kind of movement. And Rand grew in opposition to administrative authoritarianism, is what we hired state guard grounded in something. We challenged and took over the student government. So, I was on the south, go out the south and drop out. And, so well, just about a 2-year process. And so I was influenced by a brother in Ohio, who was in Cleveland, Ohio. And he's still alive. And we started Philadelphia. And again, I would say it wasn't for Smith to do it, because the brother's name is going to put out an autobiography. It was written. His name is Donald Freeman. About 70 years old. Got fired for working with Malcolm as a school teacher in Cleveland in 1965. He sent myself to organize 2 conferences in Nashville, Tennessee. We organized the first African American student conference on Black nationalism in 1964, May 1st to 4th of 1964. People from Mississippi staff came up who were in agreement with Malcolm. So we're both a little left of Malcolm, but we, are in communication. Freeman sends us into Smith, this Ghost South work for him. This is where John Lewis, he was chairman of Smith. So there was a brother named Wazir Peacock, known as Willie Peacock. Was head of Greenwood, Mississippi, Smith. He had brought me in Greenwood in 63 and said he was going to bring me back in 64. John Lewis was flexible. He didn't agree with it. And we, had the position that whites should organize in the white community and African Americans should organize in the African American community. And that's just by history that we've been trained to. So often, most of our people do not trust rights, whether they are progressive or not. You could do it, for 2 or 3 generations. We have had whites come work with us, but then when that movement is over, they're gone. And then they come back. But what you have is that same reaction is still coming from the white community. So, we can't break it down. We go in there, we be lynched. So Malcolm's position was that, and we still maintain, that the basis of racism is in the white community, and only white organizers fighting against the white racism should go in the white community to build opposition. So that wasn't the topic. But John Lewis said, I may not agree with what you believe, but you're right to support them. So he put us on a scale of how much bonus numbers on this next stage. So we went into Greenwood, Mississippi. And we were teaching, I taught politics or political education, or voter education. But you need to know how the system works, and you need to know who's running for what they represent. Or you may be bamboozled, as many were in 2008. And I still taught African history, African American history. Well, they were bombing churches. And so Snake began to fight back. Now right here, got the rest of it. And so an emergency conference was called in Detroit, Michigan, because many of the Snake field workers said that they would arm themselves for self-defense. All they needed was money and arms. And so at that time, the Revolutionary Action Movement was created. And we were sent to recruit the international spokesman. And William Worthy suggested that Malcolm X would make a good international spokesman. I said, well, I don't know. And so the group sent William Cox and myself to meet. We sat down with him. That was my most easiest assignment. It was to recruit Malcolm. Malcolm said, what do you want me to do? And we said, we want you to take our ideas and do the best we can She'd break it and make a copy. Which he did. He worked with it until his untimely assassination, which was an international success. And his captains, you may not talk about the capital stuff, the power structure. And if they think that somebody's influencing too many of them, they know. That wasn't, that was across the board decision. People that you and I were never made this decision. Like the people who made the decision in John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King. So it was those times that was what we were doing. And so our condition today is the result of what was developed in Detroit, which came off of the rebellions of 1967. By May of 68, 4,000 black workers walked out of Chrysler, shut Chrysler Corporation down. And by 69, you could fill up this auditorium with cadres of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. There's 500 members of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. Now the problem we had was, Dan would say, what are we going to do with all these white guys who keep coming to us saying, how do we join? What do we, So, and we didn't know what to do. Right. But they began to organize in the union. And so you had what was started in Detroit spread all throughout labor. And if you study labor at this time, this is when workers of all colors begin to demand higher wages, better health care, and everything else. This is when the monopoly capitalists began to say, hey, we take the our industry out of the inner cities and move on to the particular place. So globalization is the result of running away from the American Revolution. All right? That's still in process. Because what this has done has killed your future. And so they have, since the 70s, industrialized the third world, right, in order to open up markets to it. They have built up India, they have built up China, but as Mao Zedong said, you have contradictions. Now, the contradiction is that we're in a third world war. Is that the West is in debt. The West now has to go into a new imperialism or neo-imperialism for raw, for the natural resources of those third world countries. Basically, a lot of it's in Africa. Oil. All right. In competition for China, against China, to stop China in India. That's why they killed Gaddafi. Because Gaddafi was talking about pay me in gold, right? Which would have, was talking about giving Africa a gold standard, which would have gotten Africa out of debt, and the West would have been in depression. Now, how does this affect you? Is that public workers in the United States are the most organized, unionized workers with the highest wage and health benefits. Voting wise, they have been the most progressive sector. So they had to be attacked first. So this is why you had in Wisconsin the elimination, right, of those benefits. And so what you have now is that people are beginning, if nothing else occurs from Occupy Wall Street, it has been a success in education of educating the public that finance monopoly capital is the enemy of all American workers. And more and more people are beginning to see this. Rand's position was that integration, nor separation, was possible within the capitalist system. Why? You think you integrated, you ain't integrated. You sit down, like, drink a cup of coffee, you don't own the restaurant. You get along with this. You know, they the signs are there. Right. But we're not integrated a bit because the discrepancy between wealth is worse now than what it was in the 1960s. The discrepancy is that basically if I pass, I leave debt to my family. If a white collar my age passed, right, he leaves thousands of dollars to his family. The discrepancy is that the median income of a white family is 20 times greater than the median income of the African American family. All you have to do is check the 20 cents. So nothing has stopped. So even in this Occupy movement, we have to raise demands. When they, when they want to sit down and have some, laid out at least 15 things that we need to be talking about. And, so one, we have political prisoners. Nobody talks about, we talk about the civil rights, Black Power, Black Liberation Movement. There are men and women in prison who have been in prison 30, close to 40 years. Very few. So that's one. We are devastated by war that has been waged upon us for 400 and some years. But not war that slows down, but speeds up. How many know Ahmad was wrong? Everybody, every African American, I know you would say that I'm a crazy old man. Every African American household should have a picture of Oliver North on the wall with a bullseye. And train your children to throw darts at them. Because under the Reagan administration, over FEMA, he authorized and financed and mobilized to bring crack cocaine into the African American community. But he was following orders, but at least he is the target. Right? You need to know your friends and know your enemy. So we are devastated because under crack cocaine, he has survived heroin. We have survived cocaine, but that crack cocaine did its thing, and has devastated the African American family. And those conservative Republicans and those friends, those Uncle Tom, Comprador, conservative Negroes that work with it, I'm not going to say that should be done to them. But what they did, they infiltrated the judicial system. They knew what they were doing. As Malcolm talked about, he's talking about, oh Lord, please forgive them. I'm not a Christian. So as long as they've been doing it, they professional at doing it. So they infiltrated the judicial system. And they started giving African Americans longer time, longer sentences, for crack cocaine than whites for powder cocaine. Then they started privatizing the prisons as their cousins were sending the industries overseas. When you look at the system today, the largest growth industry inside the country is related to the prison industrial complex. You're living in the fifth or fourth realm. If Hitler was here today, he would be jumping up and down. Hitler told Roosevelt, wrote Hitler, said, how can you do this to the Jews? Hitler said, wrote back and said, I learned it from you. Of which he was doing when they used to call us American Negroes. So, what you have now is that an African American male that is not in college who would have a long, lifelong debt getting out of it. Has no option. Has no option. And the profit from the prison industrial complex is the largest growth industry in the country. So and the voting, so where does the voting, if you can vote in prison, you're voting upstate conservative areas, so the representation goes upstate. Where are prisons? In impoverished white communities. So keeping those whites from becoming radical, you put a prison there. So that whole community that would have been devastated, which would have been radicalized, then moves right and supports the state. Because all of them are prison guards or the making things related to the prison industry. So it's by design. So, and I'm not going to leave you on a negative note. It is up to you. And the thing is, why do we lay out what happened? Is because you're at a turning point again. America's at a turning point. In 2004. And beyond. I'm not going to say don't vote for the vote. Because I would say Negro who votes for the Republican Party is like the Jew who votes for the Maxwell. But for your generation, Occupy Wall Street can be the beginning of beginning to break from the elephant in the room. It's control of us. And so if that generates to have a new beginning for a new stage of the American Revolution. That's just my view.
No, I thought you were going to just get a history lesson. You brought it right back to the day. I told you he was my teacher, right? I don't have no weak teachers. You're right. So, let's take some, I know somebody has some questions, right? Did everybody know all the names he mentioned? Names and students. Yeah, so please ask questions. Like I said, we're blessed to have this opportunity. Have this is somebody who was engaged in the struggle and can still live to analyze it and tell us how it applies to our situation today. Let's start with my brother over here.